Emily Wilson saying there's not enough glory and sex in Nolan's Odyssey is potentially the funniest possible outcome, as her translation was a big inspiration for Nolan. It was one of his favorites, and that's one of the primary reasons everyone was saying this movie was going to be too woke. It's really interesting looking at the take of a classicist who was doing actual translation, comparing that to a filmmaker whose primary goal is entertainment. I want to engage with most of this in good faith, but there's one point I want to start out with that I found to be fairly strange. Wilson says the race-neutral casting of Nolan's Odyssey was inevitably deplored in some quarters, but there was nothing progressive about it. Most of the non-white actors, Zendaya, Lupita Nyong'o, Himesh Patel, Corey Antonio Hawkins, Travis Scott, play versions of the black best friend, whose only role in the drama is to provide aid to the white protagonist. Now, that is a very specific trope that Emily Wilson is invoking. The most obvious points here is that Himesh Patel is not black, he's a British actor whose family is Indian. To say that Nolan's take on Eurylochus is just a friend to Odysseus is, in my opinion, impossible if you actually watched the movie. The dynamic between Odysseus and Eurylochus is one of the strongest in the film. We see this relationship strained very quickly because of Odysseus's poor leadership. We see Odysseus make the decision to lead his men on a different route because of his ego. We see Odysseus's decision to attack Polyphemus after they have already gotten away from the cave, which results in many of his men dying. We see Odysseus lead his men into death against the Laestrygonians, and then we see a mutiny before the sequence with Circe. Part of that mutiny is Eurylochus, and that does not happen again in a vacuum. It happens as a response to the ego of Odysseus. Mutiny there is something that Nolan added, in my opinion, makes the story better. Looking at Wilson's translation, basically, Odysseus sends the men off. Most of them are turned into pigs. Eurylochus escapes, and he goes crying to Odysseus. Odysseus, as the glorious hero, says to Eurylochus, "Take me there." And Eurylochus says, "No, no, my lord, please don't make me go. Let me stay here. You cannot bring them back. You will not return if you try. Hurry, we must escape with these men here. We have a chance to save our lives." Eurylochus of the text is a coward who is begging the mighty Odysseus to flee and to leave those men behind, but Odysseus says, "No, I have to go take care of it." Tension and discontent between Odysseus and Eurylochus continues throughout the sequence with Charybdis and Scylla, all the way up to the sequence with the cattle of the sun god. All this to say, the performance was spectacular, and Eurylochus feels more like an independent character than someone just following around Odysseus. Bard Phemius, played by Travis Scott, is mentioned, I believe, 9 times in the story, and 5 of those are in book 1. I don't know what else she was expecting for this character, but he's not just a friend to anyone. He's there symbolically to kick off the story, using, unfortunately, Travis Scott to talk about how rap today is kind of this continuation of ancient storytelling. The whole idea that modernized it ties it all together, but stays faithful to the concept. When it comes to Zendaya's Athena, I think this is when you get closest to an argument, because she's just there to kind of gently guide Odysseus, but she's also there, as you find out at the end of the film, to be a constant reminder, almost haunting him throughout the entire runtime. She's not there to make him comfortable, she's almost watching him with judgment. She's there as a reminder of his war crimes. Helen of Troy gets a bold change with a scar put onto her face by Menelaus as punishment. This relationship in the text is played as something that is somewhat healthy and pleasant. Helen also lays out very clearly in his story that the sack of Troy was not actually about Helen. That was an excuse, right? It was actually about this trade route right here, which is historically very important. It shows the contempt and violence that Menelaus has towards Helen, which is a fairly revolutionary change for this story. Ironically, that is what Wilson was attempting to do with her translation. This piece talks about her correcting the anachronistic misogyny that appeared in previous translations, and seeking to humanize disenfranchised characters. Invites the reader to critically engage with the poem's complicated legacy as both a classical hero's journey and a horrific patriarchal fantasy. So how does this change for Nolan not match that intention? Helen is a character that is barely mentioned in the Odyssey, right? Half of her mentions are in book 4. It takes her from some smiling trophy that was heroically retrieved by her husband, right, to someone that has been wronged by Menelaus. Nolan's interpretation, I think he's leaning into something that many scholars believe, which is that she willingly left. That was her choice. She was not stolen. When it comes to Clytemnestra, this is someone mentioned in the text 3 times, and I think Nolan gives her a lot more agency and a lot more validity in his version. When you read Wilson's translation, you see someone largely pushed by their lover into a murder. You see that she is not just like angry about the murder of her daughter and taking justified action, right? She's someone that, is loyal to her husband, but some man comes along and kind of twists her arm into taking action. Quote, "While we fought and labored at Troy, this layabout sat safe in Argos, seducing Clytemnestra, noble wife of Agamemnon. For a while she scorned his foul suggestion, since her heart was good. Moreover, when her husband went to Troy, he left a poet ordered to protect her, but finally fate forced the queen to yield." Clytemnestra pops back up in Book 11, The Dead, with Agamemnon basically using his own story to give Odysseus a warning about returning home to Penelope and just revealing himself. We'll talk more about Agamemnon later, but Nolan says, what if Agamemnon is just Darth Vader, but actually far more evil? If he's just a murderous pig who sacrificed his own child, and again, his wife took justified action against him. The final character Wilson mentioned is Corey Hawkins' suitor Polybus, who is right there next to Robert Pattinson's Antinous, who are the most despicable characters in the film. Very malicious moments to shine, just like Pattinson does. He's very good. He's not there as a friend to anyone. That being said, moving through Wilson's review in the London Review of Books starts out with a strong point. Adaptations needn't and shouldn't follow the original with anything like the exactitude of a translation. Some of the best radically transform or resist the source material, providing what Harold Bloom called strong misreadings of their ancestors. I feel like she's saying something that is true. Christopher Nolan is making his own adaptation. She did her own translation. I think those things are very different. He is able to go however he wants to make this something that is entertaining and also accessible for a modern audience. Now, moving on, Wilson had complaints about Calypso, saying in the story she had a wonderfully outraged operatic speech about how divine double standards are. Male gods can kidnap and rape any mortal woman they desire, but when a goddess tries it, Zeus and his cronies scupper her chances. There's a lot to talk about here, but Christopher Nolan takes the Lotus Eater idea and combines it with the story of Calypso, where basically she's kind of healing him, she's giving him these lotus flowers so he'll forget. The story that's partially about PTSD and trauma, so she gets transitioned from a captor and eventually a rapist to someone that is basically a healer. I'll say, with her giving him these lotus flowers, if they do have some type of sexual relationship off screen, or if he had showed that on screen, that would have been rape, as Odysseus was not in his right mind. In the text, this is a nymph that is holding Odysseus on this island. Originally, he has kind of everything he could possibly want there, and there is a time when he is attracted to her. They are together, and it seems consensual. Then in the text, it changes. His eyes were always tearful. He wept life away in longing to go back home since she no longer pleased him. He had no choice. He spent his nights with her inside her hollow cave, not wanting her, though she still wanted him. By day, he sat on the rocky beach in tears and grief, staring in heartbreak at the fruitless sea. The next point was to address the contemporary language of Nolan's writing, basically saying this is okay. He's trying to just tell the story. I think she tried to do the same exact thing with her translation to make it accessible. The sequence was about the no man section being removed from Polyphemus and his story. We got that replaced by Odysseus choosing to shoot an arrow at the Cyclops as they were leaving when they already got away. This got many of his men killed, and they showed his ego in a perfect way. It just was a little bit simpler and took less time. Speaking of time, the next complaints are about not watching Odysseus build the Trojan horse, not watching him, spend more time building his raft to leave Calypso, not watching him build his marriage bed. Where exactly should this stuff have gone? Because the movie is going 1,000 miles an hour the entire time, essentially, and it's already 3 hours. Love to hear what necessary component of the story that is currently there should have been removed to watch Odysseus build a bed. Next section is where this review just kind of falls apart. Many of the film's implicit values directly contradict those of Homer's poems of warmongering, extramarital sex, cruelty to animals, abusing women, and yearning for honor are perfectly fine in the world of Homer. In this version, very bad. This is not in itself a problem, but it's a problem if the film's own values and vision don't hang together, and if the characters' motivations don't make sense on their own terms. And goes on to give an example that makes absolutely no sense. It says, defying the gods is noble and brave when Odysseus blinds Polyphemus, son of Poseidon. It's stupid and greedy when Eurylochus eats the cattle of the sun. Because again, it's depicted in the film that Odysseus' treatment of Polyphemus is too much, it's absurd, and it gets his men killed. It goes on to say the Trojan War is an aberration, the fault of faceless, monstrous Agamemnon, the one in the weird Darth Vader outfit who has failed as an American family man by killing his daughter. Odysseus is an idealized leader, which he's not in the film, who would never willingly put his people in danger. He does throughout the entire film. His foolish men insist on going to check out Circe's hut for themselves. He kindly retrieves them without pausing to have sex with the goddess even for an hour, let alone a whole magical year. He's motivated by anxiety and guilt. Again, what Nolan did to Circe makes sense for this story. She feels very real, feels like a person that has been harmed by men in the past. Rather than making her a powerful goddess that just kind of abuses men on a whim, again, written by a man, he makes her something far more human and far more interesting. Again, with Circe, just like with Calypso, there's really strange questions about consent with the sex here, which many people have said, why is there no sex in this? It's because a lot of it, again, written by men, is very odd. Hermes comes to Odysseus and says, the only way to rescue your men is you have to sleep with Circe after you threaten her. She will instantly demand to sleep with you. You also have to make her swear that she's not going to castrate you during the process. He says, quote, she will be frightened of you and will tell you to sleep with her. Do not hold out against her. She is a goddess. If you sleep with her, you will set free your friends says, and save yourself. It's not what consent looks like. If Odysseus was a female character going to talk to a man, that would be strange. It's strange in this scenario as well. Wilson goes on to say, the representation of Odysseus as a reluctant warlord makes nonsense of the movie's imagined world. We are not shown that war or killing are bad, only that good men sometimes feel bad about it. A very different point. He talks about not showing the perspective of the victims. He then says that we feel no pity or horror at the death of the Trojans. You can watch that sequence of the sack of Troy and not think about the world today and innocents being killed and genocide and everything that is happening. I would say that's exceptionally strange. Throughout the course of the film, we literally see a victim from Troy essentially haunting Odysseus. This is one of the central through lines of the entire story. John Wilson says Nolan's Odyssey lacks many of the elements that make the poem great. It has nothing convincing to say about time, memory, history, war, or the relationship between one warrior's glorious return and the lives of his family, adversaries, comrades, friends, and neighbors. Backing on, there are no sex scenes and all the food looks horrible. Touch on a final thought from Wilson here that was from a different interview, saying he feels bad about the things he's done in war and is struggling to process them in a very modern, psychiatrized way, needs drugs to do so, seems to feel bad about being a warrior. We never get to see him do much warrioring. Nolan makes the protagonist a likable, all-American hero. Homer's Odysseus wants glory. He wants to get spoils from the sack of a city. I kept looking in vain for a sense that this was a film about glory. This is a film that has an interest in shame, but I don't think it has any interest in glory. This to me is very funny because this feels like Emily Wilson saying that Nolan's version of the Odyssey is too woke for her. This is a story of a man who knows what he did, and the siren scene kind of lays this on us, and he is not sure if he is worthy to go back home. He knows he's not worthy to lead that household anymore, which is why he leaves at the end of the story. I could go on, but this video is already far too long. At the end of the day, Emily Wilson has her translation. She's entitled to her opinion of Christopher Nolan's art, which is his interpretation. I think he had a very clear vision of what he wanted to say about pointless, disgusting, and violent war, the murder of civilians over trade routes. When you think about it, what other movie does the world need in this moment?